My first time in this building for 32 years. I know I don't look it. I know I'm making it look good, despite your giggles. But yeah, 32 years since I was last in this building as a musician playing, which is fantastic. So to be back here, I didn't even recognise the building, actually. But then I don't really recognise Manchester too much. It's changed. It's amazing. It's a fantastic, fantastic place. And it's just an honour to be here. It's an honour to speak with all of you. And I hope I'm going to bring some value to this absolutely amazing event. I think it's a very much needed event. There are some wonderful things happening today. And yeah, I get to kind of kick it off. So I want to talk to you a little bit about myself. And expand on that a little bit. So I grew up in southeast London in a place called Woolwich. Don't know if you know that area. It's been traditionally an area of high crime, high unemployment, and is situated on the borders of Welling and Bexley-Heath, traditional bastions of the British National Party and the National Front. So for me, between unemployment, between crime, between racism, between that and being a young black kid growing up in that area, for me, I'm amazed that I'm in this space and I'm talking to you. Because for me, many of the people, many of my contemporaries that I grew up with are still in Woolwich, some on the wrong side of the tracks, some not up to much, some haven't made it this far. And one of the things that Woolwich is unfortunately synonymous with is the racially aggravated murder of Stephen Lawrence. If you have heard of Stephen Lawrence, if you know what that was all about, and I urge you to read and find out about that if you don't know about it, Stephen was killed by a group of racist thugs on a road that I used to walk all the time on. And I say I walked on it all the time. I had to because I had to go to music lessons. I didn't have a car, my family didn't have a car. And for me, this was how I ran the gauntlet every day of my life, whether it was overt racism, whether it was in terms of not having enough food to eat, clothes on my back. It was very, very tough. And for me, when I think about that and I think about the racism, which was very, very overt back in those days, there were no protected characteristics, right? It was just like, it was like Marlborough country. You just get out there and call people what you want to, right across the groups. It's pretty, pretty grim. Not unusual to walk out of your house, be followed by a police car for a bit, walk into a shop, be followed around. Just none of it was great. That's just without talking about all the things that you could be called under the sun quite legally. But my salvation was free music education. Yeah, that sounds like, wow, does that really exist? Did it exist? Yeah, it really did. Free music education. And that enabled me to do something for the next 7 years from starting playing that instrument, something that I would go on to call practice. But for those 7 years, we know what music does for people, particularly for young people. Develops those skills, those core skills, focus skills, working with other people, self-discipline, building your own confidence. So I loved it. I absolutely loved playing a musical instrument. It was an amazing thing for me. It was an amazing experience. It took me out of Woolwich. And for some reason, I knew I had to get out of Woolwich. I went to a music college, the one down the road, as you might have guessed from how I talked about being here today. Yeah, not the fondest of memories. Being in a building where, you know, there were like maximum 3 people who looked like me in the building. Okay, so there's not just the students, that's the teaching staff, that's the reception staff, that's the admin staff, that's everyone in the building. And I didn't really understand it at the time, but when I look back on it, I kind of understand now why I didn't spend any time in the building practicing, why I went to very, very, very few social events in the college, and why I even didn't turn up for my graduation. You can imagine with all of those things that I've just talked about, going to shake the hands of some royal person with a weird cap and a gown on, it wasn't doing it for me. And I kind of decided, okay, I'm going to push on, and I spent 20 years as a musician, playing across the industry. So jazz, classical music, orchestras, recording, all of that stuff. Did loads of it. It was brilliant. I've spent 10 years as a tour manager, working with orchestras, with individual small groups. I've spent a lot of time as an administrator working in places like the Royal Opera House. And for all of that time, for 30 plus years, I've been a teacher, teaching musical instruments to young people. And so I feel really pretty qualified to say, in all of that time, right across that sector, right across this industry, I have not seen many people who look like me. Just haven't seen that. Now, it's a funny thing. Anybody who is a professional musician in this space will know when you look at your passport and it says musician, that's pretty cool, you know? Hey, I've got kids, I've got a house, I've got to pay my mortgage, got a couple of nice cars. Oh, yeah, You're not going to rock the boat. You're not going to rock the boat, because you know what? Even if you look like the privileged, main, dominant cultural group, you still don't rock the boat, because being a musician and having those trappings is some measure of success. So when you look like me, you ain't rocking that boat. So it took me a while to think about that, and it took me a while to think about how do I get into this narrative, how do I get into this discussion, and that's Black Lives in Music. That's the organisation that I co-founded with a dear friend of mine, a black woman called Cherise Beaumont. And I tell you, whatever I just told you about how bad it was for me, being a black woman is much worse. Much worse. I can't tell you how much more, because I'm not a black woman. So when I talk to you about me, you ain't me. So when we think about that, we think about protected groups, marginalized communities. We have to think about how do we enter that space? How are we able to understand what those problems are? I think for me, there's so much that I've seen in this industry that I've just taken it for granted, you know? I mean, I started off as a classical musician wanting to be in an orchestra, and I played in an orchestra a few times in my time. Yeah, I enjoyed that, but it wasn't what I ended up doing exclusively. And very few people who look like me do end up doing that. So I think for me, I have to think about these barriers. And I have to think about where I am now, because, you know, for me, there's a book that I used to read to my children very, very regularly called The Gruffalo, if you know that book. And yeah, I had to go round, I had to go over, I had to go under, I had to go through. Yeah, I had to do all of that to try and get to where I wanted to be. Despite those obstacles, I had to try and move forward. I wanted to. But for how many more people do you think are out there who cannot move forward? Who cannot move under, over, around, through, because those barriers are too strong. And we need to think about how we support people to move those barriers, to get them out of the way, so that they're not even there in the first place. I spent 14 years teaching in one music service where I literally didn't see another teacher who looked like me in all of that time. That went as far as back of house. So when I went to the admin team and I had to put my registers in and get told off because I wanted to go and play at some gig somewhere and I couldn't teach that day, I was told off by someone who didn't look like me. What does that mean for young people? Young people who want to aspire to be in this industry. And I'm talking about me, I'm talking about colour, but actually just swap those words back and forth. Racism, prejudice, discrimination. Think about all of our community and think about how we are affected by this and what we need to do. We actually released a report last year. Being black in the music industry. If you haven't read it yet, and I'm not going to test you on it if you have read it, because it's big, you can stop a door with that. But there are some interesting takeaways. 86% of respondents felt there were barriers to progression in the music industry for black music creators. 86%. 63% experienced racism. 63%. 71% had experienced racial microaggressions. 35%, rising to 42%, so 35% of respondents, which rose to 42%, including women, felt the need to change their appearance. And I get that. I can tell you, spending 4 years at music college, being one of very few, going on into an industry where I didn't see many people like me. Wow, you know, I had to leave the reggae back at home, I had to leave the hip hop back at home. I didn't have shell suits, but I had tracksuits, you know, okay? So we need to think about that. We need to think about what that means in terms of the barriers and some of the privileges that are there that we don't even realize and we don't even see. I think about the fact that there are only 3% of conservatoire teachers who come from black, Asian, ethnically diverse backgrounds. The Lewis Hamilton Commission report last year told us that there were only 2% of teaching staff in UK schools are of black heritage. Again, I'm talking about black, but let's just talk across the protected characteristics. If the data was there, I think it would be as compelling to tell us where are the role models that we need? Where are the champions that we need to support us? Because otherwise, we feel pretty othered. We're put into a space where we are on our own. And recent research has told us that being excluded from a group triggers activity in the brain in the same region as that associated with physical pain. So, you know, when you hear someone say, I feel your pain, trust you, they don't. They don't. They don't know what that is to be in that space on your own. So we need to work hard and look at how we make change, how we support those from marginalized communities, those who deserve a chance. Is it for me? Maybe not. It feels pretty grim, doesn't it? It feels pretty grim. Talking about that, talking about my life. And it is really important for me to just share that with you because actually, that's not just then, that is actually still now. Young kids getting stopped by the police. Young children not having opportunities. Not having aspirations. I mean, can that be okay to not have an aspiration? To be in the music industry? Why would you not have that? Because you don't see the opportunities, you don't see the pathways. That can't be right. We need to do more about this. So what might the solutions be? What might be the things that we can do? And I think it's really important that we all think about that. We all have an individual accountability of what we can do, because we are all influencers. Influence doesn't necessarily mean that you can only have some kind of exerting influence because you have a position in an organization. You have a voice. Everyone here, use it. Voice your opinions. Think about what you can do to be part of this. And I think about that in the context of supporting, for example, parents and guardians to support their own wards, their own children, the people they're looking after. I can tell you, my own parents, over the span of playing from the age of 11, have been to see me play a musical instrument 3 times. My dad, none. Okay, so my mum came to see me play 3 times. And I can tell you that it made me kind of think, you know, because I know you've got a session later on, I think, about, you know, is this profession a decent job? Is it a proper job? Well, for me, it really was. And yet, for my dad, had absolute no interest in this. I can remember going to see him, and, you know, I was in whatever age, not that long ago, maybe 10 years ago. I went to see him. We were watching TV together, and there was, on the programme, on the TV, was Glastonbury highlights from the Glastonbury Festival over the years. And my dad said, "Hey, there's a guy playing the saxophone there, Roger, looks like you." Mm-hmm. I said, "Yeah, it's me." Seriously. He said, "Yeah, okay." Yeah. That didn't compute for him. It still hasn't. And that's what I'm talking about, because, you know, we as young people, we need that support. It has to come from somewhere. Sometimes we need that push. Sometimes we need just that time when you're just not feeling it, when someone turns around and just, you know, your parent, your guardian, you know, whoever's looking after you says, "Come on, let's go. Let's go and do this thing today. I know you're not feeling good, but you're going to feel better for it when you've done it." It's so important that we have that support. Because when I talk in that context, even after sitting there with my dad and feeling quite proud until the moment he completely couldn't believe that that was me on the TV, I kind of still didn't think, you know, there was any kind of, I'd reached any kind of level of success at all. And I guess as children, and we're always children in you know, in terms of our relationship with our parents, our guardians, that for me said, "Oh, I haven't made it. I haven't done it. I haven't made it." And you know, it's actually having these kind of opportunities to talk, where I talk about myself and I think, "Oh yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did that. Yeah, that's success for me. That's really success." You know, it might not have been where I aimed. How many people actually do aim and aspire to get somewhere and actually get over the line there? Not everyone does that. So for me, when I think about success, it's about you. This whole success thing is about what do you think is a success for you? For me, it's about getting up each day, putting one foot in front of the other, and trying to do what I'm doing, either with my work with Black Lives in Music or as a musician, as an aspiring musician. Why? Because every day for me was a victory. Every day when I went to that music college down the road, being the only black guy, I can tell you some of the things that happened. I'm not going to, but some of them were not pretty. I still went back into that place the next day. And I came out of there, I graduated, I went on. That was a success for me. But just putting that foot in front of the other, each day knowing you want to do something, that for me is a success, and no one can tell you different. But for any of the organizations that are here, for any of the companies, organizations, bigger groups that are here, It's people like me, it's the individuals in this room who can tell organizations whether they are successful. Because if we don't get the opportunities that we should have, then those organizations should feel accountable for that. They should want to make some difference. They need to be on the front foot. So for me, solutions, because, you know, that's all been kind of dark and I definitely want to feel a little bit constructive about this. As I said, support for parents. Think about that understanding of privilege. If you're someone who's a parent and you're able to support your children, think about all of those young people who don't have that support. Mentoring, being championed, being given that direction and that light to follow. Working together, showing people how you can work collaboratively. Providing safe spaces so that people like me or people of same-minded groups, same identity, can be in the same space and share their experiences by way of mutual support. Training in organizations. Let's get those blind spots out of the way and let's make sure we've got a full 360 vision. We can see what's going on. Decentering the instrumental offer. There's a whole global majority out there. Let's support everyone. Going into marginalized communities, not sitting in our ivory towers, but trying to do something about what's going on out there. Being on the front foot, being positive, being active, not being passive. So when I think about all of those things, there are things that we can do, there are things that we should be doing, there are things that organizations should be doing, but as I said, it all starts with us as individuals. And I want you all to think about that.